So often we focus on working with our clients, our customers, our consumers, and this is a chance to think about the ethics of taking care of ourselves and our community so we can go out and be strong in the work that we do and be strong and looking forward to our work, looking forward to the teams that we work with. So we're going to do a quick introduction. All three of us are from the state agency Vocational Rehabilitation. And we love that we get to partner with so many of you. We have about 12 staff that are at the conference this week, but a lot of you interface with us in other ways. So we just felt like this was a really important topic, and what a perfect timing at the very end of the conference before you head home. So I'm going to pass it over to Heather and let her introduce herself as one of our speakers today. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. And, you know, it was interesting as we were driving here, we had a moment to have a little bit of like a debrief of just, you know, how do we care for each other? And Kim and I had a moment to connect to talk about our life and the day-to-day. And I was just talking about like the chaos of life. And, you know, I'm caring for an aging in-law who I had to drop everything and go take care of them. And I'm sure I just see some nodding in the audience that people can also relate as well. And it's just like, sometimes we just need that moment to connect with one another to just say, you know, life is a little crazy. And we're gonna have an opportunity to talk about resources to support one another, because it's really important to have that humanistic approach to the work that we do every day, because it's important to have that care and connection. Also, I wanna talk to you about my journey as well, because my name's Heather Lindsay. I'm the Deputy Director of VR. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I also have had quite an interesting vocational journey. I started my journey as in an educator route. I wanted to be an early childhood special education teacher. And in that route, I had sat around a table in these early IEP meetings and doing these transition handoff from birth to 5, and was just fascinated with how many people sat around the table and supported one another. And it made me start this trajectory of like, what happens when students leave school? Is there still a lot of people sitting around the table supporting one another? And I found out that there's like this whole new world of people that are in adult services, and stumbled upon VR. And so for those that are in the VR room, it's one of those interesting people that at 20 found the vocational rehabilitation, the rehab counseling program, and fell in love with it, and decided that I no longer wanted to finish my education trajectory, and I went into the rehab counseling program. And so at 22, had finished rehab counseling and started my VR career. But at that time, I also finished my education degree. I also became an ABA therapist. So if you guys know what that is, it's a lot of like intervention, a lot of repetitive intervention. I also became a vocational evaluator, worked with individuals who had experienced traumatic brain injury. I was a job coach, job developer. I have been a VR counselor in 3 states. I was a VR specialist as well, specializing in autism. And I also worked for the Department of Education, Oregon Department of Education, doing a lot of work in terms of transition. So talking to educators about the importance of transition, talking to parents about raising expectations of employment, and had the privilege of developing the Transition Technical Assistance Network. And for the last 3.5 years, I have been back with Oregon VR as the Deputy Director, and here with you today. And my hobbies, thank you. I don't feel like that most days, so I appreciate that. I laughed because when we talked about hobbies, I was like, I don't know what my hobbies are. I think my hobbies are reading the Federal Code of Regulations, reading policy. Traveling, I've recently started traveling, and I have picked up kayaking, and that's been quite fun. And I actually like to do kayaking on my own, by myself, and it gives me like that solitude. Camping, but I also giggled because my teenage boys took me camping over spring break, and I've decided I am not a cold camper anymore. I'm too old for it. and I need to take care of myself, so I only camp when it's warm, and I also have like a strict criteria that there has to be a shower available to me as well. And I am on the quest for the best lazy river in the world. This is very serious. I have found quite a few out there, but like something that is lovely, that has like a nice like journey that's like a half-mile or longer. I just found out last night that in Roseburg, of all places, there's an RV resort that has a lazy river that I'm gonna go check out at some point. Do you know about this, Amy?
The only up is the only river I'm thinking.
So like,
Lazy, what that means?
oh, it's like a pool.
No river.
It's no river at all. Yeah, it's fake. It's like it's a pool, like that you just like, yeah, we'll talk later. So it's a little bit about me.
Wow, this is hard to follow. I like lazy too. And I was going to say, we might have to team up. Sharing is caring, because I have the motorhome and you have the kayaks, and now the information on where to go. So, yeah. If we have not yet met, my name is Sherry Boyd, and I have the privilege of supporting amazing staff in our vocational rehabilitation program under Workforce. And I too, this is a hard act to follow. I have a lot of journey in my career that has led me to the pinnacle of my career today. I began early age. I think if we like take a survey around the room and say how many thought you'd be here today, probably not many, right? Sometimes this work finds us, right? Our true passion and connection with community and people and service. My journey began back in high school when I was doing my best to complete the requirement for a foreign language. And I was not doing well with Spanish. And so I entered into a program, American Sign Language, that allowed a transfer for me to have the requirement for foreign language with ASL, short for American Sign Language. And so that's how my journey began. I took classes in ASL, and I quickly advanced into partnership in community, in connecting in community for deaf and hard of hearing. I then had a few hiccups along the way and really was leaning in to find myself, and landed in Idaho, where I quickly started partnering with vocational rehabilitation. And I was an independent contractor for American Sign Language, and then made my way into a nonprofit program where individuals with a variety of disability were supported. And there was, I like to say it was a great workshop in that it really did integrate individuals. Many years ago, I've been on this journey for 25 plus years, where we were really thinking about moving people from shelter back then, right, into community and really working toward individual strengths. So that journey led me to being a job coach, job developer, director of development. I'm not quite sure what exactly I directed, but a lot of community engagement. And then I began my family. And when we did so, my husband is a forester by trade, and Georgia Pacific moved us to Oregon, in which I have no family or connection. And we made our home here in Oregon back in 2008. So I quickly learned that going back into a position in community, I probably needed to know my community, or I wasn't very resourceful. So I jumped right into the school district. It was a wonderful complement to the schedule with young children. I have 2 now adult boys. And so I navigated from education into a passion part of community once again. And I entered into an IPS program. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar. That stands for Individual Placement and Support, with a county program in Albany. And I quickly elevated into supervising a fidelity model program for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. And that began my journey back in partnership with vocational rehabilitation here in Oregon. So really excited about where that journey has led me, because it opened up opportunities to be employed directly by VR. And I began my journey here in vocational rehabilitation in Oregon in 2019 as the statewide workforce and business coordinator, and then into the role of workforce and youth manager, and now all things workforce. So I am looking around this room and I see so many familiar faces, and just so excited about just kind of the foundation that kept building into all of the great opportunities that now exist, and the learning and the engagement that I've had with many of you in this room in all things workforce. So also, if you say, Sherry, can you come in and do some sign language? It's a use it or lose it skill. And I am not proficient any longer in sign language. I can hold a conversation and keep my own, but I will not be in the front. Some hobbies, crafting, all things crafting. I see a peep in the corner that helped me. Jen just moved out of the room, but she was like decoupage, like a little bit of glue and some like magazines. That's super cool. Traveling. I do like to travel. I'm not a timeshare traveler, because I like to go to different places every time I go, as opposed to going back to the same. And time with my family. I mentioned 2 adult boys and a loving, very giving husband, and I very much am committed to family first. So that's a little bit about me, and now I have the privilege of passing it over to my partner, Kim.
And we're taking a little bit of time to share because we see the value in that. So you know who we are up here, but also the sense of with your colleagues, how do you know your colleagues? What do you get to share and get to know them? Some of you may recognize me if you've been at previous OEDA conferences. I often teach on the topic of ethics because I love ethics, and it impacts all of our work, right? And I'm kind of an ethics nerd, so I'll just let you know that up front. So currently, and I actually have to look at it because I can't remember all the words in my title, but it's a program outreach and engagement specialist. So I came back to vocational rehabilitation in the summer of 2022, and I have had the privilege of doing some really neat kind of projects and activities within the program. I help out with a leadership program we have called Oregon Vocational Aspiring Leaders. I get to work with our interns and practicum students in universities and managers around that. I get to carry a small caseload, which is fun. And most recently, I get to work with Natish and our training team and helping out with some of the training we do. So that's kind of fun. And then some of my background, I taught for 12 years at Western Oregon University. They have a rehabilitation and mental health counseling program. So I taught there, and then I also did our clinical coordination. So that's like all the students that go out during practicum and an internship. I got to work with them and all the sites and stuff. So that's fun. And I actually recognize some faces in here, which makes me so happy to see former students coming out in the field and doing the work, right? I also worked at an independent living center. That's kind of like a cousin program or a brother-sister program to vocational rehabilitation. So they work at independent life things, not just employment. And so I got to do that out of the Salem area. I also worked with Washington Workers' Comp program for a summer. I was trying it out to see if workers' comp was my jam, and realized it probably wasn't. I wasn't teaching that summer and did that. I've also worked with Social Security Administration as a disability determination person, and I took great pride in having a high approval rating, meaning if you came through me and there was a way to find you eligible for Social Security, I was going to figure it out. And I was always over at the doctor's side of the room going, well, but if I do this and this and this, does that work? And that was fun. And so I miss the people contact, but I consider that eligibility on steroids. If you ever want to do eligibility for any program, that's what that job is all about. I also worked as a VR counselor for about 6 years early on in my career, and loved that. Worked with a lot of high school youth, worked with some of the fidelity programs like Sherry's talking about, worked with the deaf and hard of hearing. and just general caseload, and just loved, do you all just love the people we get to serve? Isn't it amazing? It's such privileged work we get to do. And then I've also worked in faith-based settings with growth and recovery facilitation. That's mostly been volunteer, as well as being on the State Rehabilitation Council. That's a program that provides oversight and partnership shoulder to shoulder with voc rehab, and loved doing that for 6 years as a volunteer as well. And then hobbies. I love sewing, making quilts. I do not have the time to do them, so I make these neck warmers that then I can give people. I love engaging with our teens. A lot of people say teens are like really rough. I love my teens. I mean, they got their bumps and stuff, but we have 2 daughters, 16 and 18, so we are in the thick of it. I am a hardcore thrift store shopper. I keep lists of things my friends are looking for, and I like going to Goodwill where you have to kind of dig through the bins, not the fancy Goodwill, but like the bins one. So if that's your jam, come talk to me about that. And then I'm an avid reader, both audiobook and written. So that gave you a little bit about the 3 of us. Thanks for taking the time to learn that a little bit so you know who's up here. And also think about, like, what do I know about my coworkers? Do I know this kind of stuff? Is this the kind of stuff I could learn about them? What would it be like in a staff meeting or just in a conversation, taking someone out for lunch, just to learn these kind of things? So our learning objectives for today, we're gonna work on understanding code of ethics. There's 2. Obviously, we're not gonna understand the entire code of ethics. But there are 2 codes of ethics. One is a Certified Rehabilitation Counselor, CRC. And if any of you are CRCs, which is probably more our VR folks in the audience, Teresa has a form for you that gives you credit for this, your ethics credit. You have to have 10 every 5 years. And then the other one, and I have to look at my notes because I can't remember what the acronym stands for, the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. Anyone in the room familiar with that organization, part of that organization? Okay. So this is beautiful. This is the organization that's more specific to folks in the workforce development teams. So we didn't want to just look at the CRC because that kind of leaves a bunch of you out, right? And we want to look at both of them in tandem together. So we're going to increase our knowledge of safe and supportive communities as it pertains to colleague care, community care. We're also going to talk about developing some tools and resources and strategies, and that's going to help increase our community relationship building and professional community. So you have heard me talk a lot so far. Now we're going to do a little small group discussion. Okay, so this could be 2 or 3 people next to you. I'm guessing in a room this size, it's going to be hard to hear everyone at your table, don't you think? So maybe just 2 or 3 people. But we've got some questions to walk you through here. The first is, what things do you associate with feeling warm and cozy? And cozy is not a word we hear very often, but it is something that's in the literature when we think about creating collaborative teams and community. So that's going to be your first question. Your second one is going to be, what contributes to you feeling welcomed in a community? Okay, what is that like for you? And then the third one, what does belonging to a community mean, feel, and look like for you? So maybe take some notes because the slides after this are going to be talking about these things as well. And I know we didn't get this PowerPoint to you ahead of time, but we will definitely make sure we get it so you can get it through your conference materials after the fact. So let's go ahead and take 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Let's go with 7 minutes. That feels good. Thank you. I love the robust conversations. You all enjoy each other, don't you? It's evident. It's evident. I love that. All right, so I put up some pictures that make me think of warm and cozy. People with your pet, warm cup of tea, something good to read, cozy blanket. Oh, right? Like, doesn't that sound wonderful? Go back, watch the ocean for a while. I hope you got some time to do that while you're here. What things came up for you? Go ahead and put your hand up and share. And then I will repeat what you shared just so we can make sure people are hearing it and for the video. Yes, Barbara?
Fireplace.
A fireplace, yes. Anybody else? That was like something that was warm and cozy. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Others, what other things came up? Yes.
Music.
Music. Oh, yes. Yes. Not the kind coming from the bathroom when my kids are showering, but maybe the kind I pick, right? Maybe the kind I pick. There's a heavy beat that we hear from the bathroom a lot of time. So other folks, what other things stood out for warm and cozy? Yeah, Teresa.
Sitting sideways on my couch or lengthwise with a kiki, a blanket, and reading a murder mystery.
Ooh. Ooh. So murder mystery on the couch, sitting sideways with a kiki, which is a blanket, which is so fun. So other words that I found when I was looking up warm and cozy, words associated: comfortable, homey, easy, rest, snug, peaceful, soft, friendly, intimate, comfy, relaxed, contented, sheltered, and grounded. As you talked about it, did you kind of feel some warm and cozy as you were even thinking about those things as you look at these pictures? And then feeling welcomed, what does that look like for you? Can I hear from some folks about what feels welcoming to you? What's going on when you feel welcome? Yes, back here.
Like when you walk up to a table and somebody says, "Here's a seat, join us." And
Yeah.
you're welcome to
Yeah. So when you walk up to a table and people are like, here's a seat for you, come join us, here it is, waiting for you. Even if they don't know yet that they've made that. Yes.
In the conversation when people ask follow-up questions and they're really curious about who you are and what's important to you.
Yeah, follow-up questions, curiosity to be about who you are and what's important to you. Very good, very good. Anyone else on this one? I've got a list. I've got some images here. This makes me think of the service person that's come back and that snuggle with the family member when they get back, feeling welcomed. A group of people excited, woohoo, thumbs up, excited to see you. And then that welcome mat. You are welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome here. We want you to be part of what we're doing. And then belonging to community. What does that mean? What does that feel like? What does that look like for you, to belong to community? I think of the old Cheers TV show. Am I dating myself? Do you guys know what Cheers is? Okay. My kids wouldn't know what Cheers is, but Norm. He walks in the room, Norm. People know your name. People are excited to see you. It feels like I'm not anxious walking in there. Like people are going to look at me and smile at me, and I'm going to have some connection. And maybe I have something I want to tell that person about my weekend, or something going on with my kids, or I have a joke. I don't remember jokes well. Maybe I remember part of the joke, and I'm going to try and remember the whole thing. We'll see. But those kinds of things, right? Those kinds of things. Yeah, Stephen.
For that one, what came up for me is I tend to kind of be a loner, and I like my privacy. I think that's my, but, I also work.
Yeah.
You have a work community, and you have, I don't know, the gym. You have the gym community, so you do have that. But it was hard for me because I was thinking, I do like kind of to be alone. I mean, that's ultimate for me.
Yeah.
So, but then we do have our communities.
Yeah. And let me see if I can summarize this right for you, Stephen. So you like that aloneness. You like that you kind of get recharged there.
Yeah.
But being able to go out in community, your gym community, different places you have connection is also important, and have that balance.
And communication is important.
Yeah.
So at work, communication. All the way. We're at the gym, well, not at the gym too much. Well, friendships, doing things like that.
Yeah. The communication is key within that, for sure. I don't know about you, I felt kind of clunky coming out of COVID, like, oh yeah. Like, how close can I enter that elevator with another person? Like, I'm cool with it, but are you cool with it? Because I want to be respectful, and this is I would tell my kids, I know you have a lot of peopling today. It's going to be okay. Or I'd be like, I have a lot of peopling today. Like, I'm going to see a lot of people. And just getting our minds and our bodies used to that again is a lot. So these are some places we want to start, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to pass it over to Heather. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those challenges, and then we're going to start talking about the code as well. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Kim. And when you think about building community, Steve, and you bring up a good point, because some people are like, my work is work. I don't want to make friends. That's not what I'm here for. I think that it's also good to explain that you don't have to share every intimate detail about your life at work, but there is a way to have just a little bit of that social engagement, just so people know who you are, and you don't have to be completely closed off. There's a good, healthy balance there. And then I know that, raise your hand if you have had that person that just comes into your office and is a total oversharer, and you're like, whoa, hold on, this is a lot. And finding that balance is very important too. And I've looked over at Natish, and I had like a moment of laughter, because is it okay if I share? I'm putting you on the spot. Like I love laughter, and if you don't know me, I have laughter and banter is so important to me, and almost like little jokes. So if you'll see me at a conference, I may run around and I might have ribbons and awards that I hand out just at random, or I might play practical jokes. So I've been known to put "Be Patient, Student Driver" on the back of state cars just to be funny. And this is now being recorded too, so I just realized that. But we were on a call, Natish and I, and we hung up the call really quick. Are you sure this is okay? Because now you know where I'm going. Okay, we were on this call, but we had to join another meeting, because I'm sure you all can relate to the virtual life where you're about to join the next meeting. And I had said, I need to get more coffee. I'm going to run. And then you had said something, but you had said something so fast that I had hung up and I ran, and then I had that 30-second moment of like, did she just say love you? I was like, whoa, hold on. And so we got on the next meeting, and I was like, hey, can I just ask you something? I was like, did you say love you? I was like, are we next level in our relationship? And we just had a funny moment, and the teacher's like, I don't think so, but it was just that funny, and we had that banter, and then every once in a while, I'm just like, I love you, Natish. But just so we can laugh, because work is hard. And yeah, this slide speaks to it's hard, and it has been a really difficult last 4 years. And how many of you are managers here that hire staff? Okay. How many of you have had colleagues that have moved on, seen turnover? Raise your hand. That's difficult. Hiring staff, training staff, and feeling that churn, that is so much. And these are just some small stats. But the pandemic, that was heavy. That was a lot. And people feeling so much during that time, it was so difficult. And then people not feeling that they were supported in the workforce. But it was so much bigger. It was bigger than work. It was that we were dealing with a pandemic that nobody had experienced before. We were also dealing with people that were struggling with mental health. And we also were looking at so much stress and burnout. And I'm sure some of you had heard about that great resignation. People were also rethinking what is important in life. And with people changing jobs and moving, that also is an added stress to people. And it's also an added stress and burden on others where they're trying to reestablish a new community. And a new community at work, a new community at home. And when we started putting together this presentation, we were saying, there is so much when it comes to the ethics of work and ethics in relationships, ethics in how do you build relationships with your clients that you serve, with burnout, and where is that overlap? So what we'd like to do is talk a little bit more about the CRC Code of Ethics, and then also the Workforce Professional Code of Ethics. And then what we noticed too is there's so much overlap and similarity, and we wanted to call attention to that. And then we wanted to call attention to why it's so important that we all know it, and then how we can go out and support each other. All right. I'm so used to you with advancing, but I can do this. I'm independent. So for those of you that don't know the CRC Code of Ethics, it was published in 1987, and it is a code that the American Psychological Association and the Board of Vocational Evaluators, National Association of Social Workers, and the International Association of Rehab Professionals actually use and implement and adopt and take some of that language. It is something that a lot of professional health organizations use. It's one that is quite in depth and detail. I think it's the most recent iteration is 50-something pages. And it's very thorough. It is reviewed every 7 years. And when they do a review, they actually bring in people from across the country. So they'll bring in educators, they bring in rehab professionals, they bring in counselors, they'll bring in people from all levels of rehab, which is really fascinating. I actually had the privilege of doing a review back in 2013. So they flew in people into Schaumburg, Illinois, to do a thorough review of ethics. And it was really a wonderful opportunity to review code and then also to do a review of even the CRC exam itself that counselors take. So, Kim, do you want to speak a little bit to CORE and CACREP?
Yeah, so there are university programs like the one I used to work at Western that have accreditation. Every program, community college program, graduate school program, all of that. And so there was a shift from CORE, which was really focused on the rehab piece, to CACREP, which is much more mental health and much broader. And so CORE kind of dissolved, CACREP has stepped in. And so it makes it even more important that we keep our rehabilitation code of ethics, that we have that helps define how we work with our individuals. And that's working with all kinds of diverse populations, but also making sure that disability is included in that. So that's a pretty key piece of that. And again, I'm a junkie with the ethics stuff. I love playing in it. I love dealing with dilemmas and wondering about things so we can figure out how to move forward. A lot of us have really good guts of, like, you check your gut and you're like, there's a little something going on, right? Like that's not working quite right. I'm feeling stuck and pulled between things. This helps give a framework for that. So Sherry, thank you, Sherry. Sherry has pulled up our 6 principles. So these are the things that can be, two or more of these butt heads with each other when you've got a dilemma going on. Because you're like, well, but what about this? So I have the color green and Heather has the color blue. So she helped me figure out what we're covering here. So the first one is autonomy. And that's actually respecting the right of the client, right? Respecting the right of the client you're working with, their rights, their ability to make decisions, informed choices, and their rights, okay? Sometimes that's in conflict with one of the other ones, though. So Heather, I'm going to let you, so when a client wants to really work at a bar, but they're in recovery, right? That gets tricky. Do you support and advocate that? Does that feel kind of squishy? I use the word squishy. That's not the technical ethical word for it, right? But when I feel squishy, I'm like, I'm not so sure. That would be a situation that feels squishy for me, right? I don't want to be the one saying, I'm sorry, you can't do that at all. But that feels like, oh, it's the client's choice, but we have these other factors going on, right? Maybe that's the work history they've had, right? And that's where things have gotten hard for them with regards to addiction. Do you want to do the next one, Heather?
Beneficence. So this is to do good to others, to promote the well-being of clients. We also had a good laugh while we were driving down here. We were talking about these core principles, and we were like, these are the hardest words to pronounce. And we always laugh about it. But doing good to others, and I think that we all can agree that that's something that is a core principle to all. I mean, we want to keep the client's well-being in first and foremost at all times. And when I look over here, and we'll talk about these more, it also speaks to a lot of the core principles here, So I think about promoting well-being when we're thinking about looking at employment opportunities. What is the best fit for the individual? What keeps them safe? What is also something that helps set somebody up for success? Like I think of our VR has a 5-year grant right now. Jen Munson's in the back of the room, the Disability Innovation Fund. It's called our ICAP grant, where we are supporting people in post-secondary education, and it's really promoting people to exit with living wages, and it's pretty exciting, and it's benefiting well-being, and I really truly believe in that. So, one example.
Thank you for taking the hardest one on there for me to pronounce, Heather. Fidelity is the next one, and fidelity is being faithful. I think about this, am I good for my word? Is my word good? If I promise I'm gonna do something, if I say I'm gonna follow up with something, if I say I'm gonna be someplace, am I doing those things? And again, that goes both with the clients, consumers, all those words that we serve, but it also goes with our coworkers. If I say I'm gonna have your back in this, if I say I'm gonna take that appointment because you need to go deal with something, if I say I'm gonna get that report done on time so you can move forward with your next step, those are things around fidelity. And then if I'm not able to do those things, how do I respond and how do I correct those things? Because life happens, right? We all have lives outside of work, but how do we keep our fidelity in our work?
Justice, to be fair in the treatment of all clients, to provide appropriate services to all. This is one that I truly struggle with in the role that I sit in, equitable services across the state. And I think that I'm sure that this is something that comes up often. It's, do we have equitable services across the state? When I think of our rural areas, when I think of what we have in the metro areas as opposed to some of the areas that are very rural. And are we providing equitable services to all the clients we serve?
Yeah. Non-maleficence. So you know the Disney character Maleficent? When I used to teach on ethics, I always put a picture of her slide with her big horns and everything up. And now there's a lovely movie out about her story and everything. But she intended harm, right? She intended harm in the story to people. So doing no harm. But sometimes I may not understand within someone's cultural experience or socioeconomic situation that I'm actually doing harm where I'm trying to maybe do good, like number 2, right? So I can butt those things against each other. So actually doing no harm in the work we do.
And the last one, veracity, to be honest and to be truthful. Be truthful in the work that you're doing, be truthful and to be honest to the clients that you're serving, and to be truthful in the work that we do day in, day out.
And what I love is this doesn't just fit for rehabilitation counselors, does it? I mean, this fits for all the work we do, thinking about these things. And when you got things that are bumping into each other, these are the kind of areas that do that. And then the next one, what we did was, y'all that are part of this group, the workforce development professionals, you have a much shorter list. It's 11 statements. It's something, if you become a workforce professional in this way, if you go and get your certification, this is something you sign when you do that you agree. And it's much more in-depth written than we wrote on this piece here, but there are 11 of those. And so the first one, Sherry, can I have you hold this again and kind of come this way so we can get caught on the camera? The first one is to uphold a high level of professional ethical conduct and integrity. And let's turn it a little bit so the audience can see it. See how that fits with, I'm gonna, for those at home, you won't see it as clearly, but see how they fit? See how they fit? Advanced services for public interest and trust, right? We're talking about trust. Commitment to professional development, ensuring optimal benefits to customers and community, promote cooperation and collaboration, maximize choice and consent, respect confidential information and privacy, respect cultural and ethical diversity, including interventions with disabilities, never use privilege for personal gain, adapt to change and encourage innovation, and effective services for all communities. So those are the 11. The ones that I thought fit best with our topic today, we'll go over in a minute, because first we're going to go over our focus on the fit of what we found in the code, the actual section in the code that fits with within the CRC, and then we'll look at the one for the National Association of Workforce. So when this PowerPoint comes out, there'll be that link, so you can look up those 11 too. Heather, I think this one's you.
So this was another area that we wanted to just bring attention to. This is one of the most recent updates in the CRC code in 2023. And this is the diversity, equity, and belonging and coworker relationships. So when the CRC group came back together again in 2021 and 2022 to do a review, they really wanted to put a heavy emphasis on fostering good working relationships, promoting trust and respect, self-awareness, open communication, and committing to minimizing barriers and opportunity for diverse colleagues, which is really exciting. It's definitely a change into the CRC code. And this is something where they're putting more attention to diversifying our employment opportunities, and this is something that we're also looking at and exploring with our internship opportunities. Kim, when we were talking about our internships opportunities and how many interns did we have and what was the percentage of demographic that we had, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, this is all, our 2-hour chat was quite.
We don't get that kind of time where we don't have 3 screens in front of us and talking at people and stuff. So it was lovely to have a car ride over. So with the interns that we have, which are in VR counselor positions, this year we had 12 interns across Oregon. And we have an application they fill out, and we interview them and do all that kind of stuff. And 70% of our interns that we have are from BIPOC communities, which is amazing. And we're super excited for that. And of those individuals, of the full number, 50% of those students actually have identified as having disabilities themselves. So we're super excited to see these students that we're working with that are training to become VR counselors, that are learning, that are in our offices, doing the good work of VR. And so it's exciting that means we are bringing more and more representation into our offices, and hopefully, we're trying to coach them and support them along the way with the application process for permanent positions. We have folks that get hired during internship and stuff and post-internship to be able to bring that in so we can represent our communities better and bring in more clients that say, hey, that person looks like me, or they speak the language that I'm most comfortable in terms of coming into the office. And so those kinds of things are really fun for us to think about. And the last 3 years, 70% of our interns have actually been hired into counseling positions, which I'm super excited about, because why would you want to come intern with us if you don't want to potentially work with us? And we want to make sure that those pathways are working well for folks. So that's been super exciting to have work with our ADA accommodation team to make sure we have the accommodations in place. We also have employee resource groups within DHS and making sure students know they can participate in those with different groups such as Asian Pacific Islander groups, African American groups. We have a group for individuals from the Latino and Latina communities. Different things like that has been really fun to bring them together and be able to do that. So this, we were asked, hey, you guys, we need an ethics presentation. It's like, this is the topic we want to do, and to have this as something we think about. It used to be that our code of ethics didn't really talk about the relationship with each other as coworkers, and we're finding that that is actually really important. So the next piece is looking at the workforce development professionals. And these were the ones that stood out to me as parallel to what we were seeing in the CRC. So maximum effort in the workplace to ensure optimal benefit to my customers and my organization community. I can't do that if I don't have a good flow and team, right? It's really hard to be like, oh man, I want to avoid that person in the office. Okay, and now I'm showing up fully for my client, right? It's really hard to do that. And so how to navigate that and make that work. And then cooperation and collaboration with partner organizations. It's not just your team, but other partners you work with. We want to be really good partners for y'all. We want to have good connections. We have good relationships so that we can come together. You know, maybe the client already has a really strong relationship with you and I'm a new person, but you and I know each other and we've worked with a couple clients before, or we've met at meetings, and we can say, hey, you've known her for a while. I work with her team too. I'm from a different organization, but we'd like to come alongside and support you as well. And so building off each other in those ways, in really healthy ways. So when we work together, it's not like, oh man, every time I work with that organization, it's just so much more work. It's, oh good, I get to partner with them because together we're able to do more and I'm able to get a lot out of this dynamic. Recognizing and respecting the unique challenges faced by culturally or ethnically diverse individuals with disabilities. Absolutely. How are we doing that? How are we paying attention to, you know, what do people need? What makes other people feel welcome? Sometimes what makes me feel welcome may make another person not feel welcome, right? So how do I balance that? And how do I humble myself to say, you know, it doesn't always have to be what makes me feel welcome. If it helps somebody else, I can have some give in that. I can have some breathing room in that. And then adopting innovative practices when appropriate and adapt to changes in the industry to create new opportunities. How are you creating opportunities? We had an opening for a VR counselor in the Beaverton office that was specific for Spanish speaking. And boy, it was hard to get that filled. Hard to find folks to come in the door, and yet didn't give up on it. And it took a lot longer than some of our other recruitments, but it's like, no, we know we need this in this area. We know we need this on the team. We know we need this for our clients. We got to keep pushing at this. So making those kinds of strides. All right. I want to share a comic. It says, there's a guy scooping snow, and he says, and there's a person in a wheelchair, and there's some people watching, waiting to get in the building. And so the person in the wheelchair says, could you please shovel the ramp? So the shoveling is happening on the stairs, right? Shoveling is happening on the stairs. And the person with the shovel says, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through with shoveling them off, so the stairs, then I'll clear the ramp for you. And what the gentleman says is, but if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in, right? So sometimes the way we're used to doing it, I'm just used to using the stairs, right? Well, but maybe there's a little bit different way that includes everybody. An example I think of is sometimes our offices do get-togethers, like in the summer. They might go to a park and do a staff meeting there. Making sure the staff meeting is a place that's going to meet everybody's needs. Maybe there's someone that uses a wheelchair on the team. Maybe there's someone that has IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or other things, kidney stones, whatever, where they need to be close to a bathroom. Yes. Allergies, you know, maybe it's not outside if you're on Sherry's team. Maybe it's inside, right? How do we accommodate, how do we be mindful and thoughtful of including folks, right? So we have those things. I worked on a team at Western where I had 2 women on my team that were originally from Taiwan. They grew up in Taiwan, and I knew very little bit about their culture, but I knew they both celebrated the Chinese New Year, and they did these things with red boxes and coins and different things. And so I researched it a little bit, and one of the staff meetings, I brought those things to the staff meeting to share and to give the team. And I think that helped a little bit, that I was like, So I don't know certain things and I'm wondering, and just doing things like that can be really helpful to each other. For us to take the time to be curious, you had said, how am I curious about the other person? Yeah, I love that. Is that making sense? Yeah. All right, Heather, I think.
Yeah, so these are just some other examples of creating a culture of wellness and welcoming, building opportunities. So some of the ways that you could have that quick connection is some of you, I know that in the VR offices, we have these quick huddles, and it could just be something as simple as like an icebreaker. I was actually at a national conference, and again, just good, funny humor, but just as an icebreaker, somebody had sat us in a room, and it's about 5 states that came together, and we had a national person that came and sat with us as the facilitator and didn't realize we all really knew each other, but said, you know, we should get together and try to like do an icebreaker. And I said, oh, you know, I have a suggestion. Why don't we do name, your role, and then who do we trust least in the room? And just the look on her face was like, what? But we did not do that. But actually, we did. And it was funny because it almost just became more of a like joking banter in a way. But it's like maybe a small little like icebreaker activity, something just silly like, you know, what is your favorite flower or your favorite holidays, like something that is based on like what that might be in the season. Sometimes when we have our administration meeting, we've done a what's in your crock pot, which is a virtual meeting. So we send out a recipe for what you can make in a crock pot. So you put it in the morning, and by lunchtime it's available. And so some people will have the same food, but you're not in the same room together. And the decoupage was amazing. That was really fun. We did a holiday crafting party, which was really fun, and it was fun to see people crafting with one another. Just one way to almost do a little parallel play. You don't even have to engage in a conversation. You're just sitting there in the room together, and it's a way to just build that community. It's also a way to talk about challenges too. Talk about like when we are working with clients, difficult days, and maybe to share how you're staffing cases with one another, especially when we're helping individuals in the community. We have tough days. It's nice to just be able to debrief something that has happened. You can have a little bit of the engaging conversation, but maybe you're doing something, you're crafting, and you can have that conversation, but you're also keeping busy doing something else as well. So sharing some wellness strategies is also nice too. One of the things that we did really early on and we still talk about is how are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking breaks during the day? Are you going for walks? Especially in our administration, we still have remote workers who are doing some of our policy writing. So they're just working from home. So we've talked to some people about at the end of the day, why don't you actually turn off your computer, walk out of the house and walk back in? And it almost helps reset your brain like your day actually did end. Or get in your car and drive around the block. I know it sounds as silly as it can be, but it just makes you think, okay, my day is done. Instead of like that you've walked out of the door, you're still on. Turn yourself off for the day. Or sometimes I'll hop on at night, and if I see anyone online, I kind of send a little IM and I'm like, hi, it's Saturday, how are you? Just as a reminder. You're right. I care about you. So just a couple of suggestions there.
Sharing is caring, and we're sharing the microphone. I am excited to kick off an activity. Do we like activities? I like the fun one. I'm holding signs and engaging. So, responsibility collaboratively. So think about what this means for you. And then we have some questions. And the activity is thinking about the questions in which I can read, and then you writing down response to the questions, and then if you have noticed behind you, there are 5 Post-it note, big Post-it note papers. And so the activity, and I was thinking about like, do we do this one at a time? I can tell from this audience that you guys like to get up and engage, and there's a lot of chatter. So I don't want to disrupt the chatter by saying, number one, oh, pause, break, come back, number two. So I'm trusting we've got a good chunk of time that we're going to independently go through the questions, write some responses, and then we're going to put them on the Post-it notes. And then I will take an opportunity to come around and read off. But before you break out and do that, let me just read the questions and ensure that everyone understands the directions. Because sometimes I get roller skates on and go really fast, and I need to go slow to go far. Question number one. How are you doing that here at the conference? So thinking about responsibility collaboratively. How are you being responsive collaboratively? How are you doing that here at the conference? How are newcomers welcomed where you work? Think about that. I know Heather had commented earlier on the presentation about a lot of turnover, right? Yes?
I think I'm a little confused by the first question. When you say, how are you doing that here at the conference? Can you explain what responsibility collaboratively means to you all?
Absolutely. I can give some examples which may kind of perk some ideas. So thinking about when you're at a conference as an example, sometimes there's a closed caption happening, right? And so some might say, oh, I'm only seeing a portion of the PowerPoint because there's a closed caption scrolling along the bottom, right? So how would you respond to that if that has been an experience like at the conference, as an example? If you're needing to kind of check your response to being more inclusive of something that might not be necessary for you, but for others in the room. So as a way to think about, we are all responsible for ensuring, talking again about our codes and our guidance, thinking about our responsibility within working collaboratively. And so that's just one example you may relate in a conference setting. Competing noises, sometimes there's an interpreter, right? If that's not how you are needing to fully participate or engage in a session, how are you recognizing that in a collaborative spirit, to being open and welcome to what other tools and adaptations might be needed for others?
And a lot of you are at this conference, and some of you have colleagues here from where you work normally, and some of you are solo, like you were brave and you showed up and you did this not knowing other people here. So this is about the collaborative, the community, and thinking about the question from that frame. So how in this conference have you seen it done, or how have you done it? I think about the example of, you know, someone I've never met walks by and they're looking for a seat, and you say, hey, come sit with us. Come sit with us. Come join us. We want to get to know you. And I do see a hand in the back.
Just a quick question. Is everyone writing their own answer, or are you doing it as a table?
What you're doing is you are taking a yellow sticky note and you're taking a stack of them and you're doing number one and you're writing down your own notes. And then what we're going to do is you go put it on the wall where the number is that associates with the question. So every table has 4 to 5 sticky note stacks, and you make sure everyone's got 5 sticky notes. And we're going to take a few minutes to kind of do that while Sherry goes through the questions here. Great question. Did that help answer what you were looking for?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah. We just know we are the tail end of this fabulous conference, so you've had all this opportunity to do some of this already. Right? And people walk away from conferences like this going, that was awesome. And it's like, wait a second, some of those I could carry with me and think about doing back home too.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. So how are you doing that here at the conference? How is that being incorporated with newcomers being welcomed into your work? So whether that be on a team, small, large, how are accommodations being provided? Have you considered accommodations if that's not your typical work environment? Elements of universal design. To the graphic that we saw, universal design is for everyone. How do you include others with diverse lived experience from your own? And number 5, last but not least, what does a welcoming space physically look like?
So what are some of the elements that could be in that?
So how did that feel? What kinds of things came to mind other than the questioning of instruction? Like, was there more of an awareness about, I really like what Kim had included, like, even if these aren't currently in practice, what might be the practice, right? So I'm going to go around. We don't have time, as we are your final session of the day, right? There isn't time to go and read through all of the comments, but I am going to go to a very popular one, number 2. So thinking about this transition of time from COVID and how we've probably had many newcomers onto Teams and in our workspace. So I think this one's pretty popular over here. I'm going to read off some notes about how others have brought newcomers into that workspace, creating that comfort. We have welcoming others to the table, emailing welcome on meetings. Orientation day includes walking around the office and introducing. Oh, that's very comforting, right? Being the new one and getting a little tour, maybe even a mentor or a buddy. Morning get-togethers. Boy, some of these teams seem wonderful. Being walked around the office, introducing, I always like walk and talks. Being warm and welcoming. Team trainings. In my office, not very well, but we are trying. So thinking about what tools, right? What would it take to get, ideas generating amongst the team about what we could be including? Decorating a cubicle. I like that. That's an excellent suggestion. Maybe even pulling out a little bit, through the onboarding, right? Many of us have a process from hire through the onboarding before start date. Like onboarding, I'm thinking about like paperwork and things that are needed. But once they arrive in work, do we know enough about the person that we can almost individualize a cubicle decorated? That's wonderful. And then I'll read off 1 or 2 more. Mentorship, yep, having a buddy or a mentor, greeted warmly. Everyone takes time to introduce themselves, right? I'm going to end with this one because I really appreciate not only about putting that person on the spotlight, right? Thinking about, we all arrive differently and what our comfort is. And so giving an opportunity for others to speak about themselves in a very welcoming way so that the newcomer has an opportunity to learn about teams. The next slide, before I jump to that though, let me just say, there are so many great ideas I'm only imagining, and I'm gonna take some time after this to take pictures of each one, and I would encourage each of you to do the same. So taking a picture with your phone to me seems like, for me, when I get back reading through things and familiarizing myself with other ideas in the room, these are great. So inviting you to do that at the end of session. Shifting over, you have heard a lot of good examples, like what's in your crock pot and welcoming ways for teams. I have had the privilege of onboarding a very high number of individuals. There's been a lot of growth and expansion on our workforce team, as well as on our youth team in vocational rehabilitation. So I personally have had an opportunity to onboard and welcome a lot of staff. And I too am going to take some pictures and say, how could I always be improving? But when I think about compassion in the workplace, I think about when we are feeling best supported, we can be the most productive in our work. So it really is a timely investment in productivity, regardless of where you're at. And so thinking about bringing our whole self to work, and how are we listening and learning about one another? And how are we being intentional about where people's preferences are, right? We talk about trust in the workplace, but taking almost like a trust assessment to ensure that everyone's comfortable in contributing. One thing, here's a list of a few things on the slide, and again, many examples have been provided, but one thing I do in my teams, and I encourage other teams to do this, is setting up a structure where everyone's voice is heard and they're contributing in the way that they do. So thinking about group agreements is one example I just wanted to share with all of you. Group agreements are a collection of feedback from everyone participating in a group. And this can be your individual work team, or it can be if you're working through a project, right? How do we keep on track and ensure that everyone's contributing in a way that they feel valued and accepted? So I think about some of the group agreements in my teams that have been really powerful are share the air. So when we think about makeup of groups, we think about, sometimes there's that one that speaks often, that it's usually me, if you don't know me. It's usually me. So usually share the airs on those group agreements so that I put down the microphone or mute myself and listen, because when I listen, I'm learning. Others are don't fear to flop, right? Knowing that it's a safe place to try new things. But I would encourage, and I do have a lot of resources on group agreements, and I'll leave my contact information, and it's in the last slide as well. But happy to share that. But for you to be considering, when people, again, feel supported and valued in their workplace, there's more productivity and happiness in the work environment. And that is one example of how to do that. Yes?
I was saying that first one too, that we should also extend that to ourselves.
Yes.
We can't keep going if we don't.
Yeah. And that was the first one, extend that for ourselves, kindness and empathy. As a personal challenge, I might be that Saturday on my message, and then Heather setting the example for me, like, what's going on? Where are you at? And then recognizing that if I'm sending a message to my staff on a Saturday, even if I'm saying, I have boundaries, I want everyone to turn it off and be well, right? But if I'm setting an example that's different than that, right? Then my example is what's setting the expectation rather than what I'm saying. So being kind to ourselves, setting those boundaries, having care and compassion. I love the mentorship, but mentorship doesn't have to end after the orientation and onboarding, right? That continual outreach and support that we all need. Thanks for bringing that up, Natisha.
Yeah. I do a lot of my meetings in virtual settings, and so some folks will actually put on the agenda the word water cooler, right? We don't do that in real life as much. We have our bottled water, or we have our filters and stuff, but it used to be people would get around the water cooler and have a chat. So no, this is okay. We're gonna start with some water cooler time. We're gonna set a time limit on it, but then we're gonna jump into other stuff. So one of the things I wanna bring up, this is a term coined by Brene Brown, and I know a lot of people love Brene, and it may not be one you've heard of. It's not as popular of her terms, but it's a vulnerability hangover. It's when you've shared and you go, ugh. Did I share too much? What are people thinking of me? Oh my gosh, do I need to do some damage control? I couldn't quite read that person's face. What just happened, right? And it's part of that give and take of being community with people, okay? So it happens in our quest for connection and authenticity, but we kind of second guess ourselves. And so we share something. Maybe there's a breakout group and you're asked to share something important that happened in your weekend. You shared something, you're like, oh, other people shared like they made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich this weekend. Maybe I should have gone lighter, right? Or different things. And we're judging ourselves. We feel drained, we feel exposed, we feel anxious. We're kind of going, oh no, Who are they going to tell? That was meant just for this group. Oh my gosh, what'd I do? And I'm seeing some smiles and head nods because y'all have done it, right? We've been there, we've done it. And so the way it's defined is the emotional state of discomfort and self-doubt that occurs after sharing personal thoughts, feelings, or experiences. It often arises when we reveal our true selves, we share intimate details, or express our deepest emotion with others. And it's kind of similar to a physical hangover, that feeling of regret, uncertainty, and overwhelm. But to have that hangover is to allow ourselves to be vulnerable again. So don't count that feeling when you have it as, ooh, I screwed up, I shouldn't ever do that again. Lean into it, allow yourself to process it. So your fear of judgment and rejection, right? The emotional exhaustion of, oh, now I have to regulate and monitor people, right? And there's a term called imposter syndrome. Have you all heard of that before? I love this concept. It's the concept, this is how it plays out in my brain. Security comes up to my cubicle, walks in, and they're shaking their head and they say, I am so sorry, we screwed up, you shouldn't be here. And they walk me out of the building and I've lost my job, right? That people have figured out that I don't know what I'm doing or that I am not qualified enough to do what I'm doing. And different people experience that at different levels. But when you get into higher positions of authority, higher positions of responsibility, more complex things you're doing, that happens. And we hear those stories, those messages of, oh, you know, you weren't supposed to go to college, or you're not capable of doing that. You think you can write a grant? And so we have to bolster ourselves with others. Yeah, Sherry. Yeah. Oh, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very bad at timekeeping, so I have asked my team to help me with that. And it can connect with past trauma and rejection. So it's really common. It's more common in neurodivergent folks with autism or ADHD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, rejection, depression. This tends to happen more often. It happens to the general public as well, but just kind of watch yourself and be like, oh, that's not kind. You ever have that thing where you're like, ooh, I wouldn't let myself talk to my friend like that, so why am I talking to me like that? Like, that's not okay. So to fully step in and engage with our communities, we have to be willing to have that vulnerability, right? And sometimes we have to lead in it to help our team get healthier. So navigating it, having that self-compassion, right? That care for ourselves. I've even been known, this is called like a self-soothing behavior where you kind of rub your own arms or you like massage out a muscle. How do you take care of yourself? I've had a rough day. I need to grab myself a cup of tea. I've got my favorite flavor of tea in the cabinet and I need to do that. Or I just need to get up and stretch and move between these breaks in these meetings. I can't just hot tail it into the next email. How do I do that? How do I take care of myself? How do I meet my needs that I have? Recognizing the value in vulnerability, right? It allows us to be known and opens the door for others as well. Normalizing the experience, we've all had these times. Practice self-maintenance. So not just self-care, but self-maintenance, right? How am I taking care of myself? Okay, I know I have to go to bed by a certain time or I become a cranky monster, right? And it's usually just my family that sees that. Most people think I'm pretty friendly. If I don't get enough sleep, it's not good, right? So what kind of things are important in my self-maintenance? Seeking support. Who are my support people? I need to consciously have people away from work that I can talk to about non-work things. And sometimes I need them to cut me off and say, Kim, we've heard enough about presumed eligibility. How are you, right? A project I'm working on. Reflect and learn. So reflect and learn on these things. All right. And then I also want to introduce you to a book. It's called Care Work. And it's a book in the disability justice movement. And there are a couple things in this book I really like. One of the second bullet says, no one is just a helper or a person in need, we're all both. So it's not always just about helping others, but how do we allow that to happen in our colleagues and our coworkers and those kinds of things. So care work is out of a movement of people that identify as sick and disabled, also queer people of color, and they're finding ways to, everyone's so exhausted, how do we care for each other in the midst of that without certain people only being the caregivers and certain people only being the needy? Does that make sense? And how do we do that on our teams? An example, sharing resources and showing up. Hey, you know what, this really, would you be interested in hearing about this? This is a tool I found that helped me out. I had a coworker tell me about some free yoga classes I can take online through my job that I could do for 10 minutes after work. Haven't done it yet. I'm what I call pre-contemplative, which means I'm thinking about it. It's a fancy way of saying I haven't done it yet. But a coworker shared that with me. I thought, you know, that's so nice of them to tell me about that. Having spoken and unspoken rules that everyone's got stuff going on. We have stuff going on. I'm sorry, my stuff squished out a little bit earlier today. I didn't mean to talk to you that way. Can I start over on that? You came to me and were trying to talk to me about something, right? Being able to do some of those resets. Offer what you can, right? If I offer everything to take care of everyone, I'm not taking care of me. And that there are times I can't offer things. I'm not the person that can offer. Accepting no to others' offers, not taking that personally. If I think someone really needs a meal train, that is what I think they need, that's gonna fix it for their family. And they're like, Kim, no, I do not need that. Awesome, I need to not be personally offended, right? And that's part of that community. We do have some resources that we have, and again, we'll get that PowerPoint out. I'm sorry I didn't do it ahead of time. And then just thank you. Thank you. I love this image of someone holding someone's hand, and then the circle goes around, that we stay in connection with each other, that we create community that's supportive, that's caring, that is healthy and safe for folks. So I hope this gave you some takeaways to think about that. I love that this is at the very end of the conference, because you're about to go from conference land and coastal experience stepping back into the jobs you do. And so hopefully this gives you some things to go with you. So thank you so much.